Hey folks, here we are back at Standing Tall with Gloria Johnson, here with Brandon Puttbrese from the Senate. He is the press secretary for the Tennessee Senate Dems. And Brandon and I have known each other for a while, got started together back in the Obama campaign, I guess.
Yeah, we go way back, worked together very much when I was at the state party with some of our other friends who were also there at the time, who you worked very closely with under the Obama years. I came in a little bit on the tail end of that, but didn't take long for us to get along very well.
That's right. That's right. And thinking of one of the most fun times I had with Brandon was when we went to the White House for
yes.
Christmas. And that was the year that Glitterville from Knoxville, the guy from Glitterville, decorated the wing that's gone now.
Yeah, R.I.P. to the wing where they held all the parties.
Yeah. And just the decorations of that hall. The pictures we took going down that hall were my favorite. It was so cool. But so we've been hanging out a while, and Brandon was there at the very beginning when I first got elected. And one of the things that happened was someone in my district reached out to me because they were teacher at K-12 Inc., which was this online charter school that was a hot mess. And someone who worked there sent me an email that said, and they showed me an email they received that they were instructed to take every student who failed and change their grade to a passing grade illegally. And so that person, as an educator, was, just blown away that they were asked to lie about grades a kid received. So I called Brandon. I'm like, what am I going to do here? What do I need to do? And so Brandon instructed me to call the press. It needs to be out there. People need to know what is happening, because we knew that charter schools and these online schools, it was started by Madoff, I believe.
A guy named Milken, who was charged and arrested in the 80s for fraudulent investment activities.
Yeah, did time for it.
Yeah, I think Michael Milken.
Yeah, and that's the guy we trusted to do our charter school, online charter school. And so you said I should contact Phil Williams, and I had no idea who Phil Williams was.
For the audience, Phil is the watchdog journalist in Nashville, has a decade's reputation of really stirring the pot and holding power accountable, whether you're progressive or conservative, Democratic or Republican. He is willing to put his nose in your business.
So that's who I reached out to, and he was very interested in the story. I think Phil's wife was a teacher, maybe, or somebody in his family is an educator, and so he cares a lot about education. And so he took that story, and I had probably only been up here, and that's back when we were in Legislative Plaza, and I'd been there up here moving into my office, maybe been there a week or something like that. And so he said, well, let's do an interview, and he came to my office to set up an interview. And we were probably in my office with a closed door for an hour and a half because there was so much to talk about. But the funny thing is after they left and a little bit later, I'm walking down the hall of Legislative Plaza, the gossip had already gotten in the hall that I'd been in an interview for an hour and a half with Phil Williams, and I was done.
How the legislature turns.
I mean, they just assumed there was some scandal, something I had done wrong, and I was busted and I was out. And I was like, no, you guys, I called him.
That's a fun way to get people talking, is to have a high-profile reporter swing by your office, and then everyone is looking and texting. And
especially
the rumor
an
mill starts
unknown,
churning.
and I just walked in, and they didn't really know who I was, and it was pretty funny. But that's how quickly it got down the hall before, he was even barely out of the building. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, what's that saying? It takes... the lie will get halfway around the world before the truth has its time to put its pants on. Yeah, well,
another great twang.
The rumor mill starts churning.
Yeah. So on this podcast, what we want to do is kind of get people understanding how things work, or quite frankly, don't work up here in Nashville But there's also connections to very local, your county commission, your school board, and the connections to federal level, because everything that Tennessee is doing, there's so much that's involved at the federal level as well. But I want people to sort of understand that connection and how politics does affect them. And there are people out there who don't like to hear all the negative stuff and everything, and they'll say,
Sure.
I don't do politics.
Right.
Well, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. And so
Exactly.
that's why you need to know how these things work, how to get involved, how to make your voice heard, and how to affect change if you don't like what's happening, right?
Well, and knowledge is power on that front, because the people who run this state, the Republican Party's had control for 15 years, unchecked power for 15 years. They are counting on the fact that most Tennesseans do not know or understand what is happening on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't know how things work. Just ran into a teacher and was telling her, you can sign up on the website to testify on bills. We really need teachers up here saying what this is going to look like in the classroom. It just has to happen. And one perfect example is we passed a bill about limiting websites kids can go to. And they acted as if, oh, well, your tech person can check websites to see if they're okay.
Yeah, well, how many websites are there?
Well,
Hello?
millions.
Billions.
And then on top of that, a tech person knows tech. They don't know what readability level is appropriate.
Sure.
And what topics are appropriate. So they absolutely can't do that. You're going to need a person. Every school's going to need a person doing that. It's far more involved than they understand, and they will not listen to the experts, the teachers on that topic.
That is true. Just to follow up on that, if data and science and research mattered, the policy around here would be a lot different. But the experience of experts and professionals is too often just disregarded by the controlling party because they have this antiquated, father knows best, top-down, authoritarian viewpoint, and that's how they make all their decisions.
I'm an elected official, so I know more about education than you do, or more about medicine than a doctor does.
Yeah, it reminds me of that commercial a few years ago. I'm feeling kind of ill. Well, I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, so let me have a look.
Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense.
No sense.
So thinking about when I think about last session and everything that came out, I think, what did we do that helped people? So if you could describe this last session in one word, what would that be?
Distractions would be my word.
And so by that you mean?
Yeah. There is a mass distraction apparatus happening within the Republican Party of Tennessee. And, I saw a meme going around online today about the deflecting pool because Trump's, renovations on the national reflecting pool have gone completely bonkers, haywire, algae everywhere, completely, the story. But that's exactly what's happening here. It is a mass operation of distraction and deflection because the things that people actually care about, being able to afford groceries, being able to get to work safely and efficiently through traffic or public transit, to pay for health care, to make sure their kids are in well-funded classrooms, those priorities just are not happening with any urgency or focus at the legislature. So much of what the controlling party forces the conversation to be about around here are issues that are designed to distract their primary voters from thinking about their grocery bill or their utility bill or their commute time or the cost of childcare. And so we end up just spinning our wheels while Rome is burning for so many working and middle-class families here in Tennessee. It requires a measure of disbelief if you are a Republican primary voter and your elected officials are telling you, oh, we're doing great work up there, while you're paying more for groceries, more for health care, waiting longer in traffic jams. And yet well, but my elected representative said we're doing great and we got a AAA bond rating. Well, it's like, when is the AAA bond rating going to actually benefit working people in the state of Tennessee?
When has the AAA bond rating ever helped your family? Ever. Never. It never has. Sure, we've got a lot of money in the rainy day fund. And, we had a hurricane, and that wasn't enough of a rainy day to use that fund. So come on, what are we doing? And meanwhile, how can you brag that our budget is great and that we have a AAA bond rating when you were 51st in the country in funding public ed? I would be ashamed. I am ashamed to say that out loud.
Politically, when you think about it, they have to. I'm going to step back a second. Republicans in Tennessee have mastered the ability to ignore real problems.
Fact.
Because if you're in a family, you're talking to your siblings or whatever, and the dog is loose. Well, guess what? We have to come up with a plan to go catch the dog. Catch the dog. Bring the dog back to the yard. Bring the dog back to the house. But everyone has to agree that there's a problem, and everyone does agree when you're in a family. We've got a problem here, let's solve it. But what's happened under Republican Party control over this last decade and a half is that if they acknowledge problems exist for families, there will be an expectation that they're willing to do something about it. And so what they actually do is they invent problems to attack that don't actually change outcomes for the millions of families that exist. Or they create culture war distractions that, do have horrible, heinous impacts on the people who are affected, but for the vast majority of people do not change their lives in any way, shape, or form. And, there was an interview a couple years ago when Bill Lee was running for office for governor. He was up in Mountain City, and one of the people, a mom, had shown up at a campaign event. And she said, my number one issue is childcare. We're going broke trying to pay for it. But if we don't have it, I can't get back to the workforce, and the small businesses around here need work. We need the state to show some leadership on childcare. For context, right now, childcare costs as much as in-state tuition at our public colleges on average. It's a crazy expensive line item in a family budget.
If you can find it.
If it's even available. And in her situation in Mountain City, she was in a child care desert. They didn't have enough child care for the families who were there. Billy said, absolutely, we're going to work on that. We're going to work on that. Well, 4 years passed, he's running for re-election, and the reporter who interviewed her kept her information around. And she said, Billy hasn't done a dang thing about child care, and it's driving me nuts. It's bankrupting our families up here. But that small story is just so symbolic of their entire approach to almost every single problem. Unless they have CEOs banging down their doors, they're not really addressing problems that affect everyday families in the state of Tennessee.
Right. And solving problems is hard. Solving real problems isn't easy. And so you need people to sit down at the table and develop policy. And you have to listen to the experts. And you need to listen to the people across the aisle, because they're going to point out some ideas maybe you didn't think about. And if you actually came to the table and talked about these things and listened to experts, we could solve problems. We've solved problems throughout the years of history. But really, in the last 15 years that Republicans have been in charge, we haven't solved any problems. I can say that early on, we would come out of a session and the Republicans would be able to name this big thing that they did. Mm-hmm. I remember one year, the 1 year I think that I usually don't vote for the budget, because we have not had, as long as Medicaid expansion is not in the budget, and privatizing our public schools is in the budget, I'm not voting for it.
Yeah.
And so 1 year
That's most of the budgets.
Yeah. We did. We were the last state to pass the Katie Beckett waiver, but we did pass the Katie Beckett waiver. and I voted for the budget that year because that was supposed to help all of these severely multiply handicapped and medical issue kiddos that had been left out of insurance. And so I felt like I really want to show that I'm so excited that we finally did this. And then, of course, we haven't done that right since we passed it.
It is pretty remarkable how the leadership in the controlling party will dislocate their elbow to pat themselves on the back for platitudes and policies that do almost nothing, if not nothing.
Yeah.
And frustrating for people who actually know what's going on. But like I said earlier, these Republicans are not passing laws to fix anything. They are just trying to do enough to say they did something, and then live on the distractions that create the divisions, culture war divisions within our communities.
Right, like saying that what's really affecting families is the fact that transgender women want to play in women's sports, when there's not one single instance of that in Tennessee, not one.
Right.
But they made that out as the big problem to solve, and it's just divisive. And it's hate legislation. And what happened to you guys caring about freedom? What happened? So now you're telling doctors what to do. You're telling teachers what to do. You're telling pretty much everybody but business folks what to do, and then you're doing their bidding.
Oh, yeah. People don't really have an appreciation for how captured our Capitol Hill in Nashville is by corporate special interests. The corporate lobbying class gets nearly everything they want, with very few instances where they've lost.
Yes.
There have been some high-profile fights over the year, but on the whole here, corporations, CEOs and the billionaire class are getting everything they want from this legislature and more. They're getting things that they didn't even ask for. Just a couple of years ago, when Governor Lee made the recommendation to the legislature, we're gonna do a $400 million annual tax break for the wealthiest corporations that are operating in Tennessee, more than half of which have corporate headquarters outside of Tennessee. And on top of that, we're gonna do 3 or 4 years of corporate. We're gonna give them back the money they paid on this tax over the last 3 or 4 years. And the total bill on that was basically $2 billion to our state coffers. And it seems like there's no better, image that you can think of. $2 billion of tax breaks for successful corporations, CEOs, versus
that don't pay, many of them that don't pay taxes in Tennessee.
Yeah, over 60% of companies in Tennessee don't pay these taxes. So these are only going to the majority of this money went to the wealthiest companies in the world. But when you think about what could be done with $2 billion in the state of Tennessee, that could have a transformational effect on so many different areas of government, whether it's childcare, school, infrastructure, clean water. Healthcare. The opportunities are endless.
Some of the sales tax off groceries. So much to bring down costs for families, building childcare infrastructure across the state, and especially in childcare deserts.
Yeah.
I saw. It wasn't too long ago, I saw an article, I think it was in the Tennessean, where folks were camping out for healthcare spots. Not for childcare spots.
Oh, yeah.
They were camping out for childcare spots.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
It really is. And, there's a guy we read a lot about a few years ago, Drew Weston. He had a line that I love, and I'll share it for your viewers or your listeners too. That it's not about which party is going to cut taxes. It's about which taxes they're going to cut.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be yours if you're a regular Tennessee family. And
you've got controlling party politicians up here who are talking about, we've done over $2 billion of tax relief for Tennesseans over the last decade. And then you actually go through the list, and it's like, oh, professional athletes, they got a tax break. Oh, private jet owners, they get a tax break. CEOs and big corporations, they get a tax break.
Yeah.
And by
what
the way,
did they do for me? Nothing.
They increased the gas tax, in 2017. So it's like they've been increasing fees and.
Meanwhile, private
you name
jets get a tax break on their fuel every other year, pretty much.
Well, every gallon of gas they put in their private jet, they get a tax break on it. While working and middle-class families are committing more and more of their monthly budget to their gas bill that they're putting in their cars and trucks.
With taxes that have increased 3 and 4 times over the last 10 years. So.
I mean, the priorities around here are so backwards. And one thing I've mentioned to people who start getting closer to the legislature and start paying more attention, I say, nothing will radicalize you faster than paying close attention to what's happening in the state legislature, because it is the swindle and the corruption around here is everywhere you turn, rampant.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you think of the last session? What was the most harmful legislation to come out?
I've been asked this a few different times, and there were a lot of bad bills. Some of them didn't ultimately get across the finish line. I mean, there's another one around increasing the use of for citizens to use deadly force, which is a license to kill. It's really the shoot and ask questions later, like some sort of vigilante, fantasy Wild West.
MAGA loves that stuff.
Of course, but that doesn't make groceries cheaper for anybody. It doesn't make healthcare more accessible. It doesn't make childcare more affordable. And then you've got all these attacks on free thinking public education as well. Where they're trying to control which books are available, where they're trying to micromanage what every teacher does in the classroom, where they're trying to pit parents and teachers and administrators against each other. A few years ago they banned school nurses from giving a Band-Aid to a child who skinned their knee on the playground. I mean, it's that level of micromanagement that is just totally nuts. Taken all together, there were a lot of awful things that happened. I mentioned a couple, but I think the bigger story for Tennesseans and the general public is the things that didn't happen and the ones
that we were able to stop. That people coming up and speaking up really made a difference in.
Yeah, and certainly some of the huge distractions over the last 2 years at the legislature have been the attack on immigrant children.
Yes.
Relentlessly from the Republican leaders, where they're trying to eliminate educational opportunities for children. This has been settled case law for years and years and years.
And the sponsor specifically said they're doing it to challenge Plyler v. Doe. Which is what set the precedent for every child needs to be in school, regardless of their status. It's just good, smart policy to have all the kids in school that are K-12.
That's right. When kids aren't in school, what are they doing? And that's a question.
Good question.
And that's a question that a lot of people in a lot of communities ask when they see children who are not in school at school-age times. And on that front too, there is a societal benefit to making sure that every child has an education and can compete for the jobs of the future and can help businesses innovate new services, new products, things that will improve our society.
Right, and you don't live in a vacuum. In my community, I'm happy to pay my taxes because paying my taxes means we can fully fund our public schools. And if you have a good public school in your community, your property values are going to stay high. The people doing the jobs in your community are well educated, and so everything just functions better. Your tax dollars don't go to pay for your school, your kid's school. This idea that I pay taxes so my kids should get a voucher to go to a private school is insanity because public school is the bedrock of democracy as far as I'm concerned. And it lifts all boats. Every child, public schools take every single child. I'm happy to pay my taxes so these schools are good so that my community is productive and educated.
Yep.
And so that's why you're not paying for your kids. In that case, I didn't have kids. And so should I get a check of $7,800 every year for the kids of mine that they're not educating? That's ludicrous.
Yeah, I don't use the state parks. Can I just get a voucher so I can take those to,
Right, like,
Opryland?
I don't like my public tennis courts. I want to go to the country club. So I need a voucher to go to the country club.
Yeah.
That is just
I'll go use that at the Muni Golf Course.
stupid.
That'd be great.
Right.
Yeah.
So in talking about, vouchers and the total disruption, I think we have a clip that kind of demonstrates when we doubled the vouchers, what that conversation looked like.
And at its core, this is a very simple bill. It just adds 15,000 additional education freedom scholarships to make the total 40,000. I stand ready for questions.
Simple bill.
Open up for discussion. Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hand up first.
Wow.
It's like, yeah, of course it's me.
It's hard to know where to start with this when we don't have enough information of the current program, who we're funding, and what difference. I've been up here a lot of years, and we have continually said that we need vouchers so that those students in struggling schools can attend private schools. But what we don't have is any data that shows that's who's attending private schools and getting this subsidized education. How can you call yourself private if you take public tax dollars? How can we say that you don't have to hire certified teachers, you don't have to teach our state curriculums and standards, you don't have to evaluate your teachers the way we do in a very specific and stringent way, you don't have to test your students with the same test that our public tax dollars go to? How on earth are you justifying hundreds of millions of dollars out of our budget with no accountability for how it's being spent? We pay for public schools because those public schools make our communities better. Do I need to ask for $7,300 a year because I don't have a kid that my taxes are going to educate?
Now
To me, that's
$7,500.
ridiculous. I'm proud to pay my taxes to educate other people's kids because it keeps my property values high and keeps our kids educated.
Yeah, well, you said it all right there in your response to Leader Lamberth. One thing I would add for a lot of people who don't really understand the voucher debate. So private school vouchers, state-funded, coupon to go to for a family that applies and gets one to go to a private school. Well, the majority of these families already went to a private school, I believe, as you said. So it's really just a subsidy for families who could already afford private school to continue making a choice that they've already made. But here's where it gets even worse. In every state that has enacted and created a private school voucher scam, what happens is you have subprime private schools flood the market to entice families to come to their school and tuition is the cost, exactly the cost of the voucher. These are not institutions that are built on, long records or commitment to service or integrity and education. These are fly-by-night subprime operators who are flocking into a state that has a very liberal voucher scam and soaking up as many tax dollars as they can get their hands on. It's exactly what happened in Arizona, and they've got maybe the clearest one-to-one example of what we're doing. But it happens in every single state that enacts a voucher scam. Most of the kids are never going to get into the great private schools because it's not school choice, it's the school's choice. And so the great private schools that exist in Tennessee, and there are plenty, are $10, $20, $30, $40,000 a year,
Right.
sometimes even more. But you have families who think that they're going to be able to go to those really, premium private schools. They get rejected, and then they're looking for other options. And guess who they're finding? They're finding these subprime, fly-by-night operators
That'll take anybody.
that will take anyone who walks in the door because they just want the cash grab. And there's no commitment to academic outcomes. There's no commitment to student achievement. There's no accountability for these subprime operators. And so what we end up doing is we're actually shoveling public education dollars into the worst operator hands that you could ever imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that a lot of people don't recognize, because they give you this overall average, the overall average for the state that the state pays for a student who is going to a public school, and the overall average, well, it's always the same for a voucher. It's always $7,500. But they give an average of about that statewide. But what they don't talk about is county by county, it's different. And in my county, Knox County, a kiddo going to a public school gets $5,800 from the state. A voucher kid gets $7,500 to go to a private school. So to say that the state is not giving an equal amount to each of those kids should make people furious. But the problem is most people don't know that those are the numbers. In Davidson County, I'm pretty sure a kiddo going to a public school in Davidson County gets $4,400 from the state, while the kid going to a private school with a voucher gets $7,500.
Yeah, there is, to see those priorities on paper, it makes it pretty stark what the state, what the controlling party of the state actually cares about. Because what you said is absolutely true, and I'm going to repeat it because it's so important, that right now, altogether, the state is funding at a higher level private school voucher students than they are funding the majority of kids in public schools. That is an absolute failure of priorities.
Well, I would say it's a constitutional challenge, because one of the few things that our Constitution requires us to do, it says very clearly that the state must fully fund public education. I see a challenge there. I'm not a lawyer, but I really see a challenge there. And another way to kind of put a fine point on that is my colleagues across the aisle will say, this is different fund. The vouchers aren't taking any money away from the public school fund. Well, bitch, that's a lie. I am sorry. That is just an outright lie, because nothing is more clear than about a year and a half ago when we had the first vouchers. We were 47th in the country in funding public schools. When we added that number of vouchers on there, when we expanded vouchers, we are now 51st in funding public education. We are dead last in this country in funding public education. It's 51 because they include Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And the Republicans are cracking me up on this. The rep from Greenville, I was speaking in Greenville, and they sent me some of his remarks to the Republican Party before I spoke to the folks in the Democratic Party or whoever wanted to come. And he said, well, I don't know why she thinks there are 51 states. And I'm just like, he goes, well, maybe they're including Washington, D.C. Well, do you know any civics? I mean, do you understand anything? I'd be embarrassed to say what he said.
I mean, that's a classic microcosm of how they deal with everything. Whenever they're presented with truth, they deflect.
Yeah.
Back to the deflecting pool. Wade in the algae. Tear up the blue paint. It is remarkable, and I remember seeing this research that came out in April, where Tennessee had fallen to 51st, dead last among all the states, 51st including Washington, D.C. And the really striking statistic within that report was that the state of Tennessee right now invests $1,000 less per student than the state of Mississippi.
Yep.
$1,000 less per student. And the same is true for Alabama, and it's even worse when you start looking at Virginia, North Carolina, in Kentucky, and Georgia, I think, even as well.
Yeah.
We are so far behind our peer states, and then when someone asks a question about, to Republicans, do you think it's all right that that teachers are having to go in their pocket to buy supplies for their students, or do you think maybe we have a resource problem? I mean, we got $11 billion of school renovations and upgrades needed across the state, but right now we're funneling tens of millions of dollars to charter operators and to private school operators, while our infrastructure that we depend on for a strong economy and an educated workforce is crumbling under our fingertips.
Right. Yeah. What are we, 80 plus billion behind in infrastructure projects in Tennessee?
Yeah, we have an $80 billion backlog of infrastructure projects in the state of Tennessee, according to our state think tank called TASSER. They issue this infrastructure report every year where they do an assessment, county by county, of what the county needs to invest in over a 5-year window. And what they found is about half of that $80 billion backlog is roads infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, and then there's another 10, 11 billion that are public schools. There's billions more for higher education that are also needed, and then you also get to public safety and public recreation and public health. But add it all up, $80 billion is. That to the average person, that probably sounds fairly abstract, but I'll try to put it in perspective for folks. Our state budget is $60 billion
Yeah.
each
Exactly.
year. Our state budget is $60 billion each year. So we have a larger backlog than what we have available and what we spend every year for the things that we need right now.
And then they brag about this AAA bond rating and how awesome our budget is. Well, yeah, our budget's great if you're not funding education and you're not funding our infrastructure. I mean, that's literally what they're saying. They're saying the budget is great. Outside of education, healthcare, and infrastructure, we're doing great.
One of my senators, Senator Jeff Yarbrough, will sometimes say, I'm paraphrasing, but he'll sometimes say this: well, it doesn't matter that the windows on the trailer leak. It's paid for, free and clear.
Yeah, exactly. The leaky windows are paid for.
Yeah, but the trailer's paid for.
And so then instead of addressing the lack of funding and then getting really upset when we point it out, boy, do they get upset.
Yes,
and
they do.
And they try to, distract and deflect again when it's on, these were numbers from the teachers union. But the teacher union got these numbers from the state websites that
right.
say how much they're spending per child.
And you notice they didn't say the numbers are wrong.
Yeah, right.
They just quote the source of the numbers. But the Census Bureau puts out similar numbers each year, and they say, essentially the same thing. Tennessee is bottom 5 funding for public school students in the nation. That should be an embarrassment for every family, because that is public education is not just an investment in each student, it's an investment in our economy. You cannot attract world-class jobs to an area where the public schools are completely dilapidated and underfunded. You have to have a strong public education student base if you want to attract the 21st century jobs that are going to pay workers a good wage and good health care.
And if we want our most talented kids to stay here,
bingo.
We need to keep our best and brightest here in Tennessee for those jobs. But so many of them leave and go somewhere else because we have a $7.25 minimum wage.
Yeah.
And there's really not a lot of support for them once they can't be on their parents' insurance anymore. They sure as heck can't buy a home when they've got $50,000 to $100,000 college loan debt when they get out of school.
Well, and you just said something that kind of reminds me, I hear Republicans say all the time, oh, well, It doesn't matter that overall, even though Tennessee workers on average earn thousands of dollars less than workers nationally, that doesn't matter because we have a low cost of living. Well, tell that to a mom and dad who are trying to balance their checkbook right now. Tennessee, Republicans live in this, not all, now I'm not talking about Republican voters, I'm talking about the controlling party Republican politicians. They live in a fantasy land where right now they are saying that, Tennessee has a low cost of living, but they're just saying it without any connection to the lived experience that people are feeling. Economic well-being is probably the biggest factor for families right now because right now electricity is higher than ever. Gas, $4 a gallon. You've got healthcare, premiums are more expensive than they've ever been. Deductibles are going up, copays are going up. Prescription drug costs are going up. Childcare, we mentioned that earlier, costs the same as in-state tuition at many of our public universities. You also have, rampant congestion, which is more cost on your car, more wear and tear sitting in traffic. And I'm probably housing. We have a housing crisis statewide. That is not just limited to our big cities. We have a housing crisis all across the state. Families are feeling pinched in every corner of the state, and Republicans just refuse to do. Republican politicians in the legislature are refusing to do anything about it.
And I think I really want people to understand that when I say Republicans a lot, what I mean are elected Republican officials. Because the Republicans that live in my district do not feel that same way, and they are out in the world. But sometimes I think my Republican colleagues go to church and Republican meetings, and that's about all they do in their community.
Sure.
I live in East Tennessee, which is predominantly red, so every day I go out, I'm going out into, I talk to Republicans every single day and interact with them, but I don't think that they talk to people who struggle or to people who think differently than them ever, because it seems like they look at me like I'm crazy when I tell them something's happening in their very own community.
Yeah. The disconnect between Republican politicians and Republican Party voters at the local level could not be wider today in Tennessee because, even if you ask an average Republican before they get up here, why are you running for office? Well, I care about education, I care about infrastructure, care about small businesses and creating good jobs. And then they get up here and they just fall in line with the, party bosses doing whatever they tell them to do. And then the actual priorities that families care about just get completely ignored. And that process has been repeating itself for 15 years because in Tennessee, we have complete unified Republican government and have had complete unified Republican government for a decade and a half. That means there's no checks and balances. And the only check we have, because the courts are not holding Republicans accountable to the Constitution, the executive is not holding the legislature accountable in any way, meaningful way, shape, or form. And so the only check we have is the electorate. And it's no coincidence that Tennessee is one of the hardest places to vote. It's no coincidence.
On purpose.
Well, exactly. It's no coincidence that it's one of the hardest places to restore your right to vote if you've come into the law over time, and it's also no coincidence that they've built this ecosystem where they're just driving distractions and misinformation to their primary voters so they can avoid a real conversation about the issues that matter to working families, middle-class families, family farmers, and small business owners.
Yeah. And, that's the thing you always hear so much. Oh, we really care about rural communities, and we care about farmers, and we care about this. But everything that they do is the antithesis of what these folks need. Trying to allow poison and farmers to take away their ability to sue if they're harmed by these pesticide poisons is remarkable. This is not done for farmers, it's done for corporations.
Yeah.
And we saw that play out in a way that, we actually are one of the states that beat that terrible legislation. We saw it pass in some states I thought should have been able to beat it. and they didn't. But that's dangerous legislation.
And that is a success story that I know you and I can talk for days, weeks, months about all of the horrific things that they're doing around here. But every now and then we do have some wins. And normally those wins come in the form of beating back a terrible bill.
Yeah.
And there's a couple good recent examples that I think should give people some hope for positive change in Tennessee, that the people still do have the power to make a difference. And that bill related to glyphosate immunity for Bayer Monsanto was an egregious abuse of lobbying power, trying to shield an international company from any lawsuits related to farmers or people being poisoned in rural communities. The people spoke, and the people won in the state of Tennessee on that issue. I don't see the farm lobby lose many fights, but they pushed to get these protections.
Big farm. I mean,
Big,
it
of
was
course, big ag.
Corporate,
Exactly.
yeah, corporate farms, big ag. It was them. It was the Farm Bureau.
Yeah, exactly.
But Tennessee family farmers were up here. You know, they were
Raising
testifying. They were saying what was going to happen. And it's one of those bills, you know, that typically when we beat something back, a lot of times it's some of the really more conservative folks teaming with the Democrats, you know, on issues like vouchers and this ag bill, that they just said absolutely not. And it got a lot of attention in the extreme conservative media sphere as well, which kind of helped stop that legislation. So
Of course.
you know, it's fascinating to watch that. But yeah, I mean, we have to talk about the things that are so dangerous and harmful that we are able to stop and to beat back for sure. So, you know, and just going back a little bit to schools, one of the things that we passed vouchers, which is harmful and defunding our public schools, and we're 51st in funding now. But also, we spent a whole lot of time to teach things that are just ridiculous. I mean, you know, one of the things that drives me craziest, and I'll have friends who are Democrats, and we'll be in conversation, and I'll say, well, you know, there's Bibles all over school. And I'm like, what? Like, we say we have the pledge and a moment of silence every day and every morning in every school I ever taught in. And they're like, what? Because Republicans are out here saying you can't say the pledge or the prayer, or you can't, there's no Bibles in school. We got to put the Bible back in schools. I've always had a Bible in my classroom. And there's Bibles all over the school. And the Bible's not, and there's prayer in school. You just can't force people to do it.
The crazy thing that has happened over the last few years in all these culture war fights is that Republican politicians accuse Democrats of indoctrinating children. That has been a huge talking point for them.
Groomers.
Grooming, indoctrinating, trans agenda this, or blah, 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 blah. Well, you know, this is one of their unicorn fights where this is not actually happening. Schools are teaching, you know, they're teaching the facts. They're doing,
Teachers
reading, writing, arithmetic.
Facts, not feelings.
That's right. And yeah, are there books that have some topics that stretch a child's mind who maybe has never left of the Tri-County area? Yeah, of course there are. But that's what reading is. Freedom, that's what the freedom to read is all about, is to be able to put yourself in places and concepts that are completely foreign to you.
That's what education is.
But it's as if they're afraid. So they call this indoctrination when students are learning things that don't neatly fit their worldview.
Somebody might have two dads instead of a mom and a dad.
Exactly.
Why not learn about the world that you live in?
Well, precisely. or that maybe racism existed in America. Well, yeah, there was 250 years of slavery. Yes, of course, racism existed, and bigotry and discrimination. Yeah, existed in America, but they're just so it's as if they're just afraid of these like basic fundamental truths about reality. But now it's been perverted. Not only are they trying to silence communities and rewrite history with a more favorable narrative to conservative thinking, now they're actually pushing conservative ideology into our K through 12 curriculum. Last year, I think there was a bill about pushing anti-abortion ideology into classrooms.
Well, we have to put that video in the classrooms as
That's
medically inaccurate.
Medically inaccurate.
It should be embarrassing and shameful.
Yes.
It is so outrageous.
And in addition to that, they're pushing a very what I would say is a misguided Christian nationalist agenda into schools as well, to only talk about the good parts of religion without the full context of a lot of these stories and a lot of these parables. Anyway, so they're using. They are the indoctrinators they accuse Democrats of being, and it is accelerating. And I don't think people really understand how fast that ball is starting to roll down the hill.
Yeah, it really is, and we saw so much legislation of things they wanted us teaching. We get in the white now. There was the success continuum. Like we have to teach kids that the way you become successful is graduate high school, then you graduate college, then you get married, then you have kids. Nuts. Just completely nuts. So that's one way to become successful. But basically, you're telling kids that don't fit into that continuum that they're not a success, or they can't be a success.
Or their family members aren't successful, right?
Or their family is less than because they didn't do it right.
Yeah.
And it's just remarkable to me how they will justify this. But one of the people Gino Bulso, who brought that bill about the success continuum, also brought up the bill about teaching religion in schools. And I think we've got a clip of that.
This bill, HB 1491, is a bill to put voluntary vocal prayer back in our public schools.
It never left.
The bill, as drafted, does essentially three things. One, as I mentioned, it will allow for voluntary vocal school prayer during non-instructional hours. It puts the Bible back in school to be taught K through 12 as history and as literature.
It's been a while since I've actually looked at a fiscal note, and the fiscal note included cost of litigation because this is likely unconstitutional.
Well played, G.
You have a huge fiscal note on this bill. Litigation is mentioned as a potential in the fiscal note. And have you talked to the AG about this bill, and is the Attorney General supportive of this legislation?
Representative Bozo, you're recognized, and y'all can go back and forth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me respond to both those points. First, I have not spoken directly.
Of course, I've not done any research.
And second, the fiscal
note
note
you can
actually
cut it now. Yeah, I've not spoken to the AG, and then he says no. The fiscal note is mostly about the books and the curriculum, materials that are going to be needed when you teach the Bible in the classroom. Dude, it didn't say that. It talked about litigation. I mean, your fiscal note says this bill is going to be litigated.
It's funny, too. There's a story that happened in Nashville that got a lot of buzz in conservative media, that during a Muslim time of observance, there were students, that there was a room set up in the school for students to observe their daily prayer. And that got a lot of buzz in conservative media circles,
lost their minds.
Conservative social. Yeah, that's another way to put it. And yet here we have a lawmaker who is talking about voluntary prayer in school as if it doesn't already exist. until you get rid of all tests, there's always going to be students praying.
There's going to be teachers praying too.
Teachers praying too.
I pray everybody behaves today.
You know, this idea that like prayer is banned is such a conservative fallacy.
It's just a lie.
It's just
a damn lie.
I mean, being spun for what I would say are political and ideological purposes, because folks like Rep. Bolso want every Christian, honest good person, every honest good Christian in the state of Tennessee to believe that Christianity is under constant attack from public education, which is just such garbage. I shudder to even say it because it's just such garbage. It is so untrue. Like you said, it is a lie. And James Tallarico has been running in Texas, and he had said something that I just thought was so good, that the only thing more dangerous, the reason Christian nationalism is so dangerous is because the politicians who use Christianity for political gains believe they're on a mission from God. And that is a dangerous setup for people who have so much control over our daily lives, our housing, our health care, our child care. And to put all of that through their narrow interpretation of what Christianity is a dangerous thing. I mean, when you think about Jesus, he was a Middle Eastern who crossed borders without a passport, giving away free health care.
That's right.
And turning over tables for the rich who
the
were
moneylenders.
who were, subverting the purpose of the churches where he was visiting. The Bolsos of the world and this, Christian nationalist push that they're doing in the state of Tennessee is a very insidious plot to confuse, distract, and drive a very narrow ideological political agenda.
Yeah, it truly is, and it's frightening, when you've got what's happening in Jackson County and you've got a whole group of folks trying to fund this takeover of a county so they can have this white nationalist haven, I guess, is just outrageous. And that it's not how the majority of Tennesseans feel, and it's not how they feel about our neighbors who worship different than us or their skin is a different color than us.
That's right.
Most of us aren't afraid of that.
Yeah.
But the elected Republican politicians are, or the ones who may not think that way, but they don't have the courage to stand up. And the thing that drives me crazy is a complete lack of political courage today by my colleagues across the aisle. There were a couple of people in the Senate from Knoxville who I think very possibly didn't love what our special session was about. And one of them showed up the first 2 days, but not for the floor vote. The other one didn't show up at all. Supposedly they were on a vacation, but my colleague next door, Rep. Stevens, was in Morocco, and he came back because it was his job. So, they could have come back. They could have been a voice like we saw in South Carolina, where those folks in the Senate stood up and said, we don't want to do this. We're not going to be a part of this. And they didn't do it. Imagine if a couple of brave senators or somebody in the House, less faith in that, but it could happen, didn't agree with it and stood up. There were some that didn't vote for him, but not a one of them said a word, didn't say a word publicly.
We have found ourselves at a place here in Tennessee where the controlling party politicians have so much power over the electeds within their caucus. And people, like you just said, are afraid to stand up and speak truth to power even within their own party. One of the things I tell people all the time about, what kind of people run for office? I'm like, the dumbest people in the state.
Thanks, Brandon.
Well, they don't always win, but we have a lot of. Let me put it another way: we have some of the most courageous people in our state who are up here elected, fighting the good fight and living out their values. We also have people who are here for a social club. This is the best Republican Party social club in the state. It's paid, you get health care, free gas to travel back and forth to Nashville, a per diem to go out and eat at all the nice restaurants in Nashville, and you got a team of corporate lobbyists up here who are ready to kiss your ass 5 days a week. And so for the there are so many Republican Party politicians here who just love the ego trip that they get to come and hang out with all their Republican buddies across the state. And so they just fall in line and do whatever the party bosses tell them to do, because it's easier to stay in line than it is to ruffle feathers. The ones who ruffle feathers get pushed to the side real quick. And there are plenty of examples of that. You know better than I. But overall, like the quality of most elected members up here is in question, because they're not actually digging into the policy details. They're not actually focused on having a fight that is going to improve outcomes for Tennessee families. They're really just going along to get along, collecting a check, getting fawned over by these lobbyists, and then headed back home.
They truly are. And even some of the ones that I would think do a little more work, specifically the trigger bill, the trigger ban on abortion, we go back to that piece of legislation that was only 2 pages long. And one of my Knoxville colleagues on the other side of the aisle said, well, you know, they told me it did include life of the mother as an exception. But
so, did you read it?
And so I voted for it. And this is one I really would have gone, it's only 2 pages. You know, I would have expected him to read the bill. How do you trust those people? He knows they lie every day.
I know.
Why would you not read the 2 pages? And every day he pushes around the edges. Oh, well, I'm going to do something. I'm going to write legislation to make an exception for life of the mother. He's never tried to get behind it. He might have written something, but he didn't run it.
Yeah.
You know, have some courage. It's the same person who will say, well, you know, I went to the bathroom on that bill. And like, that's a courageous stand. I didn't vote on it because, you know, I walked out during that vote. That's not courage.
Yeah, that happens entirely too much here at the legislature, where Republican politician decides to buck their party. They do it in the least visible way possible, as to not ruffle any feathers and to not get the political favoritism for a chairmanship or, you know, you name it.
I'll lose my chairmanship. Yeah. I'll lose my nice office.
It's really a sad state of affairs.
Yeah. Well, it is, because, you know, who feels it is these families that aren't getting any of the things that they desperately need in Tennessee, struggling to pay the bills, and we're up here doing this nonsense.
And when some of these guys go home, they're still going to blame Democrats.
Yeah.
Well, you know, dang Democrats. Well, you know, Republicans, you've had control for 15 years straight. Complete control. Anything that is going wrong in state or local political governments, you know, you can basically tie it back to what's happening at the state legislature.
Absolutely.
The policies here have been disastrous
100%.
For local governments, for families, for schools, you name it.
And when I'm out in public and I'll say we'll be out with the delegation in front of the school board, and I'll say we are now 51st in funding public ed, my colleagues across the aisle, we've spent $8 billion the last 6 years to do X, Y, Z. That number doesn't mean anything. Then maybe we were supposed to spend $16 billion, because the number that matters here is 51.
Yeah.
We're 51st. So clearly, whatever you've spent, it's not been enough.
Well, Mississippi's spending more.
And then they'll say, well, you can't just throw money at a problem. Well, you threw it at tax breaks for corporations to the tune of $2 billion.
Yeah,
so
no
maybe
kidding.
you can.
Yeah. Well, and actually in education, that's such an area where it is so well studied that actually if you do throw money at the problem of low academic performance, money will make a difference.
Because the way you can see this is you can go to which states have the best outcomes. Shocker, the ones with the best educational outcomes spend the most money. Who knew?
Well, and even in Tennessee, over these last couple of years, we've seen some boost in academic performance, and Republicans are really crowing about this. The one factor that they leave out, though, is that under Joe Biden and the Democrats in Congress, we collectively, taxpayers invested something like $4.5 billion, injected $4.5 billion into Tennessee public education, specifically
all those tutoring programs
for interventions and tutoring, and to help kids who are struggling in the moment rather than waiting for summer school. Like let's get them immediate tutoring now. And you know what? Wow, it's as if magic happened. We saw some academic gains. So yes, funding absolutely matters to academic success and outcomes, because also you're not going to keep a professional workforce at the head of the classroom if your schools are completely under-resourced and the teacher can walk across the state line and get paid $10,000 more a year.
Well, thanks so much, Brandon, for being with me today and talking about all these important issues and helping to break it down for Tennesseans and Tennessee families, because I feel like so much of the noise coming through folks aren't getting. And the thing that I love about a conversation with you is you can really break it down to how it affects individuals and Tennessee families.
Like Captain America said in the Avengers, I can do this all day.
And I know that you can. So we'll probably come back and do it some more. I just thank you and appreciate you so much for helping to do this, because I think that what so many families need is truthful information that really shows how things impact them. Because if you're not paying attention, you need to know, because it's affecting you. And we need government that cares about Tennessee families. So thanks so much, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you.